the man in the trenches.
The mud clung to his skin like a second layer of despair, cold and unrelenting, seeping through the tattered remnants of his uniform. Elias huddled in the narrow trench, his breath shallow and ragged, the air thick with the acrid stench of gunpowder and wet earth. Around him, the world had dissolved into chaos, a symphony of distant explosions that rattled his bones, each boom a reminder that death lurked just beyond the crumbling walls of dirt. He pressed his back against the slick embankment, fingers digging into the soil as if to anchor himself to something real, something that wouldn't shatter under the next assault. It had started with a thunderous roar, the sky splitting open as shells rained down, turning the once familiar battlefield into a labyrinth of craters and smoke. Elias had been separated from his comrades in the frenzy, a lone figure scrambling into this forsaken trench for cover. Now, as the first day bled into night, he felt the weight of isolation pressing in. His mind raced, replaying the faces of those he'd lost, ghostly echoes that whispered doubts into his ear. Was he truly alone, or had the enemy encircled him, waiting for his resolve to crack? Hunger gnawed at his insides, a sharp twist that mirrored the fear coiling in his chest. Water trickled from the trench walls, pooling at his feet in murky puddles that reflected his hollow eyes. He cupped his hands to catch a few drops, the taste metallic and bitter, like swallowing his own regret. Every shadow seemed to move, every distant crackle a potential end. Yet, deep within, a flicker of defiance stirred, a quiet voice urging him to endure, to fight not just the unseen foes above, but the darkness blooming inside him. As the bombardments intensified, shaking the ground like an angry god, Elias wondered, how long could a man wage war against his own crumbling spirit before surrender became inevitable? The trench, his prison and protector, held its breath, waiting for the battle within to unfold. The second day dawned not with light, but with a relentless barrage that hammered the earth like fists from the heavens. Elias curled into a fetal position, his body aching from the constant tremors, each explosion sending shards of dirt cascading over him like a burial in slow motion. His ears rang with a high-pitched whine, drowning out the world until all he could hear was the frantic drum of his heartbeat. Thirst clawed at his throat, raw and insistent, forcing him to lick moisture from the trench walls, salty with the sweat of fear and the residue of smoke. He imagined the cool rush of a stream from his childhood home, the memory of fleeting oasis amid the desolation, but it only sharpened the pain of what he'd lost. As hours blurred into an eternity, hallucinations began to creep in, born from exhaustion and the isolation that wrapped around him like barbed wire. Shadows twisted into familiar shapes. His brother's face, laughing as they once did under summer skies, now contorted in accusation. "Why did you survive?" the apparition whispered, its voice echoing in his mind. Elias shook his head violently, nails digging into his palms until blood welled up, a sharp sting that grounded him in the physical agony. His legs cramped from immobility, muscles screaming for movement, but to rise meant exposing himself to the unseen snipers or the next wave of shells. He rationed the few scraps of bread in his pocket, each bite a deliberate act of resistance, chewing slowly to savor the illusion of sustenance. By the third day, the bombardments grew sporadic, lulling him into a false sense of reprieve only to shatter it with renewed fury. Rain poured down in sheets, transforming the trench into a muddy grave, the water rising to his knees and chilling him to the core, his skin pruned and blistered, every shiver a reminder of his fragility. Doubt festered like an open wound. Why fight when surrender promised peace? Yet, in the quiet intervals, he forced himself to remember small victories. The way he'd patched a gash on his arm with strips of cloth, the knot holding firm like a promise to himself. He whispered affirmations into the void, his voice hoarse and trembling. One more hour. Just one more. The mental battle intensified, fear manifesting as vivid nightmares even in wakefulness, visions of crumbling walls burying him alive, or enemies emerging from the fog to drag him away. On the fourth day, hope flickered dimly when he spotted a discarded canteen half buried in the muck. Trembling hands unearthed it, the few sips of stale water, elixir that revived his parched resolve. But the triumph was short-lived. A nearby explosion hurled debris into the trench, a jagged rock slicing his forehead. Blood streamed into his eyes, blurring his vision, and pain exploded like fireworks in his skull. He pressed a muddied rag to the wound, tears mixing with the crimson flow, not just from hurt but from the overwhelming surge of loneliness. I'm breaking, he thought, the admission a heavy stone in his gut. To combat it, he began to hum fragments of old songs, the melodies a fragile thread connecting him to humanity. Each note pushed back the encroaching madness, a small conquest in the war against despair. The fifth day brought fever, his body burning from within as infection set in from untreated scrapes. Delirium painted the trench walls with illusions, comrades calling his name, only to vanish when he reached out. His mind waged fierce skirmishes, memories of love, lost clashing with the instinct to survive. He clawed at the earth, building a makeshift barrier against the floods, his fingers raw and bleeding, each scoop of dirt a testament to his unyielding will. In moments of clarity, he reflected on the human spirit's tenacity, how it bent but refused to snap, drawing strength from the very pain that threatened to consume him. A rat scurried by, and in his desperation, he considered it sustenance, but revulsion stayed his hand, proof that some shred of dignity remained. As the sixth day unfolded, exhaustion draped over him like a shroud, his thoughts fragmenting into chaos. The bombardments peaked in intensity, the ground heaving as if alive, forcing him to dodge falling clods and shrapnel. Panic surged, his breath coming in gasps, but he anchored himself by focusing on sensations. The rough texture of the trench wall under his fingertips, the metallic tang of blood on his lips. A breakthrough came in the dead of night, a distant flare illuminated the sky, and for a heartbeat, he believed rescue was near. Though it faded, the spark ignited a deeper resolve. He confronted his inner demons head-on, acknowledging the fear but choosing to defy it. "This trench won't claim me," he murmured, the words a vow etched into his soul. Small adaptations accumulated, conserving energy by controlled breathing, scavenging for edible roots, unearthed by blasts. Each act built momentum, transforming survival from instinct to deliberate defiance. By the seventh day, Elias was a shadow of himself, emaciated and battered, yet forged anew in the crucible of suffering. The psychological torment reached its zenith, with self-doubt screaming louder than any shell. Visions of giving up played out vividly, climbing out to end it all, but he resisted, drawing on reservoirs of courage he never knew existed. Pain radiated from every joint, his mind a whirlwind of hope and horror, but amid the turmoil, a quiet strength emerged. He realized that the true enemy wasn't the bombs or the isolation, but the temptation to yield. In pushing through, he glimpsed the boundless power of the human will, a force that turned agony into armor. As the seventh day waned, the bombardments began to falter, their rhythm breaking like a storm finally spent. Elias lay against the trench wall, his body a map of bruises and scars, each one a badge of the battles fought within. His breaths came easier now, shallow but steady, as silence descended, a fragile gift after the ceaseless roar. In that hush, the weight of his ordeal crashed over him, not as defeat, but as a profound awakening. He had stared into the abyss of his own frailty, felt the pull of surrender tugging at his edges, yet here he remained, unbroken. Trembling, he pushed himself upright, legs wobbling like a newborn's, and peered over the trench's rim for the first time in days. The landscape stretched out in ruin, craters pockmarking the earth, smoke lingering like ghosts, but in the distance, faint figures moved, allies perhaps, their forms silhouetted against a paling sky. Hope, long buried, surged through him, warm and electric, chasing away the chill that had seeped into his bones. Tears carved clean paths down his grimy face, not of sorrow, but of raw, unfiltered gratitude for the life he'd clawed back from the brink. In those final hours, reflections flooded his mind like a gentle tide. He thought of the courage that had sustained him, not the bold, heroic kind sung in tales, but the quiet, grinding persistence that refused to fade. Survival wasn't about invincibility. It was the art of enduring one shattering moment after another, piecing together shattered resolve until it held firm. The trench, once a tomb of despair, now stood as a testament to human resilience, the way a single soul could defy the chaos, turning inward turmoil into unyielding strength. Pain had been his teacher, fear his adversary, and in conquering them, Elias discovered the profound truth. The greatest victories are won not against external foes, but in the silent wars of the heart. As rescuers finally approached, their voices calling out in the gathering dusk, Elias whispered a final vow to himself, his voice cracked but resolute. He had fought the darkness within and emerged, not unscathed, but unbreakable. And in that emergence, he carried the essence of what it meant to be alive, the fierce, unquenchable fire of the human spirit, burning brighter for having danced so close to extinction. In the end, it was not the bombs that defined him, but the will that outlasted them, a flame that no shadow could snuff out.